Hi, you're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Well, after 2.5 hours of bilateral talks between External Affairs Ministers Jay Shankar and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, the two sides reached a 5-point agreement to disengage and de-escalate the situation along the line of actual control. According to a joint statement issued by the Ministry of External Affairs on Friday, both ministers had a frank and constructive discussion on the developments in the India China border areas as well as on India China relationships. According to the statement, the two ministers agreed that both sides should take guidance from the consensus reached by leaders of the two countries on developing India China relations and ensure differences do not become disputes. And the two foreign ministers agreed that the current situation was not in the interest of either side. The MEA statement says that the two sides agreed that the border troops of both sides should continue their dialogue quickly and disengage, maintain proper distance, and work on easing tensions. The two ministers also agreed that both sides should abide by all existing agreements and protocol on the India China boundary affairs and maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas and avoid any action that could escalate matters. Well, the point is that all of these things sound very good and fancy and benign, but at the same time, has China moved back an inch ever since the last 4 months? Have they, in fact, tried not to, make matters worse on attacking Indian soldiers or showing aggression at the LAC? They still claim that they have, in fact, rights till finger two, and we say that we have rights until finger eight. So why don't they get down to the specifics? They should back off Pangong So. They should back off the other areas that they have forcefully occupied, and India is not going to relent until that happens. But what does this dialogue mean? Does it really mean anything concrete has been achieved between these two countries, or was this just posturing or lip service on behalf of the Chinese? We'll talk about this with our panelists on the show. Joining me on the broadcast is Sumit Peer, political analyst, Mr. Jitendra Ojha, national security and geopolitical expert. Major General Dr. Gigi Dwivedi, global and strategic affairs expert, also joins me on the broadcast. Wing Commander Praful Bakshi, former chief spokesperson for the Indian Air Force, also joins us on the broadcast. General Dwivedi, let me start by asking you a very simple question. Can China be trusted? Even after we have had this diplomatic, perfect talk with the Chinese foreign minister, but does that really amount to anything? Should we put, like they say, any salt to what the Chinese are saying?
Well, I would say that talks are always a process, and between the two nations, this is one channel of communication. But in the same breath, I would also like to reiterate that Chinese are the masters at the 5-point and 24 character game, and they have played this game since 1962, and I think we should have learned enough lessons. Chinese have never honored any agreement, and my own experience when I was there, we had that time signed 1993 and 1996 agreement, which had clearly stated three fundamental points. Every dispute to be resolved through dialogue, no force is to be used, and the areas which are disputed, the gray zones, there will be only patrolling and no permanent structures or fortifications will be allowed. Now, let's look back. The Chinese have violated all the agreements at will, and this is not only 2020. In 2013, they had come in the Depsin Plateau, 2014, they had come in Chumar, 2017, they are in Doklam, and 2020, they are all over in DBO, Galwan, and Pagongso. Now, what lessons do we draw out of it? I would say the lessons are fundamentally very clear. Chinese are very selective as far as the agreements honoring is concerned. Chinese have played a game that is keep nibbling and keep negotiating as and when it suits them. They have never honored the sanctity of the LAC, which has been always violated at will. Now, two important points I want to fundamentally make. At this point, why Chinese are at it? We have gained a huge strategic advantage, and someone, unlike me who am on the ground, that this advantage that we gained in Kailash range is something like mini Siachen, where I was again a battalion commander. Now, Chinese having lost this very, strategic height. Now they want to be in dialogue. Since May, there have been six co-commanders talks. There have been talks at the level of WMCC. There have been talks at the level of defense minister, and now finally between Wang Yi and Mr. Jaishankar. Now, I think we need to be very cautious because Chinese are still trying to buy time and see if they can negotiate on their own terms, which they are not going to. We must stick to our position and make two things very clear to Chinese. Firstly, whole start point or bottom line is 20th April, line of actual control. And even when we disengage, de-escalate, Chinese have built tremendous amount of infrastructure. Even if they go back, they can always come very quickly and they have an advantage infrastructure. And secondly, border talks and the bilateral relations cannot be delinked. They have to be seen through the same lens.
Absolutely. Sumit Peer, what do you make of this conversation? Obviously, the Chinese have agreed to certain demands. A five-point agenda has also been, in fact, concluded after this marathon meeting, which lasted for almost 3 hours. Both sides, have to, in fact, work on agreements and protocols, keeping in mind that they have signed these agreements and protocols in the past. But at the same time, let me reiterate this. This is something that I've been saying for a very long time. And in fact, you have also voiced the same concern that China cannot be trusted. They will say one thing on your face and do the other behind your back. How do we guarantee that does not happen? There's not an affidavit that we can have China sign because to them, even that is not going to matter.
Vineet, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. The point is very simple here. Vineet, China cannot be trusted. This is all smoke screen for deceit, smoke screen to deceit, whichever way you want to look at it. They have created this multiple smoke screens since 1962, and this is one more attempt to create a smoke screen. Oh, let's talk. The point here is that does this Wang Zi has any power? Does he hold a commitment? Look, we have a sovereign government and we have a defense minister where our defense minister can take a call, where our external affairs minister can take a call. Is it true for China? We need it is not true for China. It will go back to one man. He will take all the decisions. You look at the things what are happening. Regila Ridge, our soldiers and their soldiers are at an eyeball conflict. We have taken southern Pyeongso. We look over the Moldo region. Chinese are unhappy with this. They are losing that leg. Look at the latest study by the Harvard University where they say Chinese will not be only a disadvantage. They will lose if they fight with India. They have no advantage in the mountain warfare. Look at the yesterday. French defense minister coming for the induction of Rafael. Why does she need to come? It's a very, very clear message to the Chinese that we are in India. Look at another development. Japanese signing a defense logistics pact with India. With all these things happening, and do you think you can still trust Xi and his squadron of men? They are handpicked by Xi Jinping in the Western Theater Command. Beneath the fact remains, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on PLA modernization. Your handpicked generals are there for 5 months. What are they doing there? Counting mountain rats and hunting them and eating them possibly. What have you achieved by taking those advantages or trying to enter our India, our territory for last 5 months? These are your handpicked men. What happens to hundreds of $billions of PLA modernization? Well, the experts say they are not, their mechanized corps doesn't really work. The experts say they cannot fight. With all these things we need, they are all creating smoke screens. It is for us, do we want to go by the Chinese bluff or we trust our experience of last 60 years? Prudence says, do the talk, do the negotiation, koi harj nahi hai, but keep your ammunition dry. With Chinese, I repeat, you can only negotiate with a gun on your table. We have to thank our Indian military, we have to thank the current dispensation, Modi ji and this government, that Chinese are still in those hills. If we don't have Indian military, we don't have Indian army, we don't have the political will, sir, they would have taken Ladakh by this time. We have stopped their wheels of aggression, and what is rattling China is that we have blunted their aura. They had made aura, nobody can change CCP. PLA is invincible. That aura is blunted beneath, and this status quo is costing them a hell lot of image and is blunting their most potent weapon in the Chinese armor. That is propaganda. See this defense pact. See the French minister coming. Now the people are clearly coming and aligning with India. That is what China cannot afford. That is what Xi and his cadre of men cannot afford. So I would say, keeping the diplomacy aside, diplomacy only works when you have power on your side. Even in Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, at times you have to fight to maintain peace. That is what we are doing. We need baat karo, but do not trust them. Do they have an intention to talk? And the last point, the person you're talking with, What is his power to take decisions, Vinny? That is the biggest question mark. He might go on a U-turn, and as we are talking, they might be trying to capture one more peak. The deceit is what is in their blood, and they only know deceit and deceit and deceit. Smoke screens and smoke screens for deceit. I rest my case, sir.
Absolutely. Mr. Oja, how can we expect China, to call us out and consider us a pawn of the USA and at the same time preach us about advocating confidence-building measures to maintain, enhance peace and tranquility in the border areas? So you'll have to unmute yourself.
Winning Chinese very often use, not very often, they consistently use diplomacy and even propaganda as tools of warfare only. So there is no way they would have gone for this dialogue if they were in a position to have a military advantage. You must also appreciate, the Chinese psyche. They would avoid a major confrontation and war that will have heavy cost for them. So naturally, as our two previous panelists have said, our army has put them under enormous pressure. We are in a position of advantage. So naturally, they would like to avoid as far any confrontation as far as possible, because in that confrontation, they stand to lose a lot. But having said that, we 100% agree. There is absolutely no way on your show we have maintained that pressure has to be maintained consistently. We both realize that war is not in interest of anyone. But Chinese, again, have a tendency to go for war only if the cost is very low. The moment they realize the cost is going to be very heavy, they will back off. But here they have come with a very detailed arrangement, very detailed preparation, and naturally the concerns are justified. But I would slightly disagree, not entirely, slightly disagree, that Wang Yi is a very professional diplomat, so is our foreign minister. They cannot decide. But what they have done is they have got a little bit of time for both sides to reconsider and review this thing. Reconsideration is not on our side, but on part of Chinese side. If Wang Yi is able to convince Xi Jinping that this kind of confrontation with India is going to shatter Chinese dream, and whatever they are expecting, to come as a major, not the most powerful global thing, that is going to be decimated. You also have to see, Vinit, a little bit what they've been trying to tell the world. They are trying to tell the world that the democracies are very disorganized. See the COVID response of India. Even you see the Global Times report about India today, or even about this talk. They have put the onus entirely on India. So if we expect that by this talk we are going to de-escalate situation, this is not going to work out. At the border, how do we behave? It depends on that. How our military is acting, it depends on that. As long as there's pressure, Chinese can get something out of it. You must appreciate that these talks have happened in Russia, isn't it? Of course, Russians have not mediated, they have facilitated. So even if after this point of time, if Wang Yi is able to convince Xi Jinping that, look, this is a good way to back off and with their prestige intact, because after all, they have something to gain. It's not the Americans who have facilitated this thing. They can send a message to America that, look, in Russian capital, they've held this talk, and these talks, both sides have agreed. But it depends to the extent to which Wang Yi is able to convince. Let us also remember, Wang Yi is one person who has been talking about Xi Jinping's philosophy school and Xi Jinping's diplomacy. So Wang Yi is not very powerful, but still he has been trying to emerge as a loyalist. So if something happens in this way, if Chinese leadership is convinced that, look, they have something to gain, they are able to send a message to Americans that they have, without their involvement, they managed to resolve this thing. This is the only gain they can have. But going by the Chinese psyche, moment they feel that, we have lowered our guard even a little bit on the border, something which we cannot afford, and something going by the Chinese psyche, they will be tempted to continue with whatever they have been doing. So this is what I believe.
Absolutely. And Commander Bakshi, the foreign minister has reiterated some virtues that countries who enjoy a good bilateral relationship usually invoke whenever they meet each other. But that's really, contrasting to the behavior that we see on behalf of China at the other side of the LAC. 5,000 plus troops, heavy deployment of artillery guns, new infrastructure coming up. They are preparing for war. So you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go, sir.
question is
Still,
what the current statement on diplomacy from our side, whatever it may be. But the Chanakya Niti does not say the same thing. We created Chanakya. They never taught us to believe people or the negotiator like China, because China is always nibbling at the convenience, snacks of convenience, and that's what China will always do, because they are like a squirrel who will work throughout the year to gather nuts for the winter. And that's what China is actually doing, preparing for the next winter, and that's what they do, keep amassing their territory. We cannot fall for this. Their diplomatic media control is very good. International media control is very good. They're very aggressive on this issue, and that's what they're going to show. What this current meeting, diplomatic meeting has achieved, I do not understand, and I don't think so anybody can explain it to me that what has come out of it. What we must understand is the defense ministers meeting. After this meeting shouldn't have taken place to start with. Whatever the case may be, even if it has taken place, we know what to do. The entire the record is in front of us. Our land, what they have occupied, is in front of us. I do not know why should we be thinking about it. We have started on a right foot now. I used to talk of Onimos gets it go. We have already started. We have entered the race now. Why should we look back? We have taken a couple of heights on the north and the south, both of Bengal. Why are we worried anymore now? And why should we think what China is going to do? We have to think aggressively. If China has got 5,000 to 8,000 troops and artillery and guns, what stops us from doing it? We should have activated our thing to Chushul and Daulatbeg Goldi. The troops landing there, the light tanks at least moving up. I know we have also moved our tanks. I'm fully aware of it. But then we don't have to look back. We don't have to worry about what China will say or not say. We have to worry about how do we get our land back. This should be the main worry to us. And what about, Air Forces sitting on the side? We should have at least started. Now we are actually telling the truth. When I speak that we should put in our attack helicopter, everybody starts saying it will escalate war. Believe you me, this syndrome we are still suffering from, 1962 syndrome. The weapon is with us, the field artillery, the heavy artillery is with us. We should be using it to our advantage, which we can. And the field is absolutely clear. The heights which we have gained, we can fire through artillery and multi-barrel rocket launches on the northern bank of on the Pangong Lake. Why are we waiting? This is what I am wondering. I think we are waiting for some major negotiations which will take place in the world where India will play the lead role. I hope not. I hope not. We are not waiting for that. We have to show results on the ground. Then only Chinese will respect us. Chinese are not going to respect you at all. They will think that they can walk through anything what they say and do, and we will accept it. We have taken the aggressive stand, and now we are only waiting to just accelerate our mode. At least we should now increase our firepower, if nothing else.
Absolutely, General Dwivedi. The Chinese will never appreciate you or respect you, even if you help them get a UN Security Council seat. And that's exactly what India did a few decades back. But at the same time, we know that the Chinese media is insular. They do not, in fact, do or hold anything which the government does not want them to. But at the same time, Global Times has been going at India, defaming us, misinformation being spread throughout the world. And obviously, Xi Jinping is in the know when it comes to all this information being circulated to the world. So what Xi wants and what Wang Yi wants are two different things. But out of these two, we know who's going to prevail.
Well, I'll address your question of Global Times and equation between Wang Yi and Xi Jinping a little later. But I'd like to go back in history because Xi Jinping has great penchant for history. You go back to 1962, on the eve of the war, Mao called his commanders and gave one line, very clear statement. He said, we can have peace with India, provided we can force India onto the negotiation table. Now that's the playbook what Xi Jinping tried to play. Well, he had very clear-cut military and political aim. Political aim was to show Indian leadership and Indian polite and give a very clear message, look, you toe our line. And militarily, they wanted to reach the green line on 1962 line, whereas DBO, Galwan, the Depsan and Pagangso had to be readjusted. Having said that, now let me come to two important issues. First and foremost, when Xi Jinping gives strategic guidance to his commanders, he puts on the hat of commander in chief and not the president of China. Secondly, equation between Wang Yi and Xi Jinping. Wang Yi is the mouthpiece of Xi Jinping. He is not going to advise. He doesn't have the guts or the power to advise Xi Jinping. He has only one mandate. What Xi Jinping wants, he must mouthpiece and try to put across. Fourth level, you see the fourth level of the game, I wish to correct. There are 50,000 Chinese troops. They have these two strike divisions, four motor divisions, six mechanized divisions, absolutely poised for any offensive. 150 frontline aircraft position at 5 airfield. That's the quantum of force, and yet they want to talk peace. Remember, in mountains or on ground militarily, the one who has boots on the ground dictates the negotiation on the table. Today, we have the boots on the ground. We have been able to turn the tables, and therefore, we should now drive the diplomatic political process. And in that, there are only two mandates. One is Chinese need to go back where they came from, along with the divisions. And secondly, border talks and bilateral relations will go in hand. This business as usual is not going to be valid anymore.
Absolutely, Sumit. A very valid point. The intensity of the preparedness at the LAC and the way the Chinese have poised, their next aggressive move is completely different from, the line Wang Yi has been doing, and that's obviously a line which he's been taught like a parrot by Xi Jinping. We should not be, in fact, falling for their bluff.
I think, Vineet, it is quite evident, and what generals have rightly said, and I want to compliment him. And I think 2 or 3 days back on a show of NewsX, General Dwivedi explained what are our advantages militarily and how we are at advantages. That is what the nation really loved and appreciated. Now, having said that, we cannot trust what they are doing, Vineet. That's why I use the word smoke screen. This is just a smoke screen. They're using the diplomatic forums, they're using the humility, they're using the civilized behavior of a civilized country to work against you. You look at their deployments at LAC and you talk in peace. 2 days back, their foreign minister says, when the 5 of Indians were missing, they say, Arunachal is our territory. We cannot abduct our own citizens. On the second day, he says, okay, let's continue to do business as usual because this business gives you $50 billion a year. Now with the app ban, we have reversed whatever they took it from us for last 10 years. They have seen these hundreds of billions of loss coming their way. Now, which army carries this gongdo? Gongdo is what the PLA calls that sharp object put it on a bamboo stick. They call it a gongdo. Only barbarians carry these gongdos. You are carrying carbines and gongdos. You are talking peace. Arunachal is your territory. You are talking peace, right? You have massive deployments in LAC. You are talking peace. You are at an eyeball to eyeball conflict. You are talking peace. What do you think? Either you think the world is stupid or you think you are too clever. Either of that is not true. And how can we have business with you when you have killed 24 brave hearts? I'm not counting 160 Chinese graves. I wish there would be more. But after that, everything has changed. You cannot have business and death going hand to hand. It does not happen in the civilized world. We need one Indian diplomat recently quoted that if China crosses the red light, we are going to retaliate. That is what is worrying them. That facade will be broken. That aura of Xi and his men will be broken. We need, last point, world is aligning. And we cannot wait. And we have wasted enough time, sir, with those non-aligned movements. We have wasted 40 long years. We must quickly see where the sides are, where the alignments are. It's getting largely bipolar. And we have to call Chinese bluff once for all. This bluff cannot continue. It has already continued for 60 years. Time to call it out now. We are in a position, we are in the state, we can.
Sumit, just a couple of minutes left on the show. I'll try and get quick points from Mr. Oja and Wing Commander Bakshi as well. Commander Bakshi, I'll just come to you momentarily, sir. Mr. Oja, if Mao wants us or Xi Jinping wants us, or if any Chinese premier wants us to come to the negotiating table, then why have they been carrying off this ruse for such a long time, ever since 1962, that they try to engage tensions at the LAC and bring us on the negotiating table?
That's the deceit has been a very integral part of their both diplomacy and way of life, not only in diplomacy, even internally they have been very deceitful towards each other. So this is one thing West has failed to appreciate about China. And regarding peaceful coexistence with China, I don't think as long as we have asymmetry of this kind of power, we can ever peacefully coexist with China or even Pakistan, because both these conflicts are identity driven. And in this identity driven, they are driven by this sense of superiority. This is not new. This has been there for a long time. They have been ridiculing India as a civilization because as a civilization, we have been shrinking. We have been ruled by outsiders. So that kind of arrogance is very much there with the China. Even if we have peace with China, this peace is not going to be endurable. Endurable peace will be possible only when we are in a position to rebuff them. And as we mentioned earlier, right now they have come for these talks and dialogues only when they realize that there will be heavy cost for China. And our position has to be very clear. Whole of Aksai Chin is part of India. Their occupation in that region is illegal because in 1928 map of Peking clearly shown entire Aksai Chin as part of India. So with Chinese, moment you lower guard, you run the risk. So we hope that we do not run this risk and we are careful and alert. And whatever advantages have been secured by our armed forces on the line of actual control, those are maintained for the time being and rather enhanced further.
Okay, Commander Bakshi, concluding points from you, sir, and then we wrap up.
The basic thing is that China is not only pressurizing India, it is pressurizing all the countries around Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries. Now the question is, we must assume the leadership of ASEAN countries and other countries around by creating a proper Asian Union against all these activities of any country, including China. Until we bring up this point was brought out by Prime Minister Nehru, and he ran it for 15 days in 47. Only thing because of Banding Conference and all, that was overlooked. This concept where India assumes the leadership of Asian countries, this will work very well and we can bring this point home. But our military preparedness must now continue at double the speed. We have lost this race a lot. From 1962, Chinese have gained against us. Now we should not be behind and should not shy off in using our weapons. Let me tell you one thing. You have the initiative in your hand and surprise in your hand. Half the battle will be won. We should not shy off now. We should actually start using the weapons, whatever the field commanders think is correct, and should not hold them back.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this debate.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.